INJ is going to $100 next, and in today's video I will be providing you guys with a trade setup that you can take in order to make sure that you are not going to miss out on this potential pump to $100 for INJ. So in today's video we are going to talk about the USDT pair of INJ, but I'm also going to talk about the Bitcoin pair of INJ. Now first let's talk about the USDT pair, then let's go over the Bitcoin pair, and then I will be providing you guys with an actual trade setup on the USDT pair. Now what we can see over here on the USDT pair is that it is currently trading within this range over here. So what we can do is that we can identify a range for INJ. We can identify the range low like this. We can identify a beautiful range high area right over here, and we can also see that INJ was trading in a very similar range right over here before it got this drop off to the downside. Right now over here the difference was when it started dropping off, it actually made a huge dump. Over here, this drop off failed, which is a strong sign by the bulls, and instead of dropping off further, like we did over here after that range, instead of dropping off further, we push back up and we shift the structure back towards the upside. And that was my first reason why I'm cautiously very bullish on INJ. We swept very important high time frame sales and liquidity over here as well on that dump, and like I said, afterwards we started pushing up and we shifted structure back towards the upside. Now what I really like about this range over here is the area where this range is taking place, and this is something that not many of you guys understand. Many of you think that after a push to the downside, a range like this is bearish and can be called a bear flag before continuation to the downside, right? That's what many people think. But actually, if a range like this, a sideways range like this, takes place in a high time frame sales and liquidity pool, like we see over here, since we had so many lows that were building up over here, and all of these lows are indicating a lot of sales and liquidity, which means that beneath these lows, we had a lot of sales and liquidity resting. If a sideways range like this takes place in a high time frame sales and liquidity pool, it's actually an area that smart money in the bigger players inside of this market can use in order to fill their own bigger buy orders. Right? And why is that the case? Because they need all of that liquidity to fill their orders. Now you might think, okay, but Jip, why, if the price was so bullish and so strong, wouldn't we wick into that liquidity pool, take out all of that liquidity, and then reverse back towards the upside? It is due to the fact that it takes time for smart money to fill their orders. You have to realize that they contain millions and millions and even hundreds of millions of orders, and it takes time for their orders to get filled and for people to start selling inside of this area as well, because the longer the price action moves sideways, the longer the price action provides these dumps over here, the more people start panic selling their bags, or they simply start selling their bags out of boredom or out of impatience. Now what does smart money do? They use that sell pressure to fill their own buy orders, because you have to realize that, think in a logical way, if someone wants to buy, there's always someone that has to sell to them. So let's say if they want to buy 1,000 INJ, there needs to be someone or multiple people that in total are willing to sell 1,000 INJ as well at that exact same price, right? Now, and that takes time because not everyone sold on this dump, but once they saw the price moving sideways, pushing up, and then over here seeing another dump inside of this dump over here, there might have been a lot of people that were like, okay, I'm done now, I'm getting out of INJ, it's gonna go to $10, I don't want this stress anymore. Now, and that sell pressure is exactly being used by smart money to fill the orders over here, and right now what we are looking at is a potential reversal play. And that is definitely something that we should definitely take into consideration, and this also leads to a higher time frame potential PO3, in which we have our accumulation over here. Currently we are within the manipulation phase before indeed the higher time frame distribution phase towards the upside, and my target for this distribution phase is indeed $100 for INJ. Now before I give you guys the actual trade setup for INJ, I also quickly want to discuss the INJ against Bitcoin pair, because obviously we always want to buy altcoins that are going to outperform Bitcoin. And what is interesting at first glance is once again a huge downtrend that is being followed up by a range. Retail traders will think, okay, this over here is a bear flag before continuation to the downside. We know if this sideways range takes place in a high time frame sales liquidity pool, it's actually potential bullish reaccumulation. And what do we have? A high time frame sales liquidity pool over here. Beautiful confluence. What we can see is a local sweep over here of sell-side liquidity, and what we can see is that the price afterwards was holding on to that indeed range low area over here, and that is in my opinion very bullish, in which we're looking at a potential 3-tap pattern over here, potential reaccumulation range. Important right now is for the INJ versus Bitcoin chart is that it's going to gain this range high area over here. It's going to flip the range high, break out of this reaccumulation phase like this, it should send towards buy side liquidity and buy side liquidity. Very simple. High time frame wise, on the 3-day chart, what we can see is that INJ is basically retesting the previous range high area. So if we map out the previous range high area over here, what can we see is that INJ is basically retesting the previous range high area. Guys, you should consider that this is a deviation, all right, and that the actual range high was formed after 2 taps over here, another tap over here, and 1, 2, 3, 4 more taps over here. Currently, INJ versus Bitcoin is trying its hardest to hold on to the previous range high area, which is super bullish as well, in which it swept the perfect retest of the range high area. So some very bullish structure being developed on the INJ versus Bitcoin chart, and definitely something we should not be underestimating. Now, if we take the trend-based FIB extension and we see wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, potentially wave 4, wave 5, then we can take the trend-based FIB extension from the low to the high, back to the higher low, and we should target the 1.618, which is all the way over here. If we measure the target, we can see that's an approximate 350% increase. Let's take into consideration that Bitcoin on itself is also going to rise. That means that INJ versus USDT is definitely going 4x from here at minimum, and that means that INJ versus USDT is going to trade at $100 and above. Guys, now let's dive into the trade setup. Now, if we start looking at a potential execution for this trade setup, we always want to go to the local time frame, the local price section. What I first want to do is map out the mid-range of that range that we were just talking about for INJ. And if I map out this mid-range, this definitely becomes a pivotal level to me. And I quickly also want to once again map out that range low level over here. And I want to once again map out that range high level over here. Now, if you have this range, and we can see that we are currently trading above that mid-range. What I really like around this mid-range is that we were finding resistance once, twice, and 3 times over here after it has been providing support many times in the past. Now, what is interesting to me is that when we gained that mid-range, when we broke above that mid-range over here, we put in a beautiful bullish fair value gap right over here, and we can see that over here the price took a little dump. And if we go back to the lower time frame, we can see that over here there was some supply being formed, and that supply is exactly to the T aligning with that hour 4 bullish fair value gap. Now, right above the bullish fair value gap is where we have sell-side liquidity resting beneath this low, right? Because I think many people that didn't want to use this low for their stop loss for longs and didn't want to use this low for the stop loss for longs, they were looking for a low slightly lower. And this is the first low that they are encountering. So I think many people have their stops resting beneath that low. We know that we always want to start entering positions where other people are getting stopped out. That means that once we take out this low, this is the area where I start building my swing long position on INJ. Now, talking about a potential invalidation for the trade, we can see that over here we have a potential invalidation. Now, why is that the case? Because it swept important sell-side liquidity over here, made a push up, gave us a valid break of structure over here. So this is basically the low that started this impulse, that started this break of structure. So it makes up for a nice and clean invalidation. A bit of a riskier invalidation is this low, which is in my opinion also pretty clean, because it swept this sell-side liquidity over here as well, and also gave us a valid break of structure over here. Once again, why are these these break of structures valid and not invalid? Because this high brings us to a lower low compared to this low that brought us to that high. This high brings us to a lower low compared to this low that brought us to that high, making it a valid break of structures and providing us with clean and valid invalidation for our trade. So let's say we start looking for our first entry right around here. If we take out that sell-side liquidity and we use this low as our invalidation, and we are going to target $100 for INJ as our main target. We can see if we target the $100, we are looking at a massive swing trade of approximately 15R, let's say 14.65R. That means that we can also use the wider invalidation, the safer invalidation over here, and that still offers an RR of 11.44. Yes, it might take a few weeks to play out, guys, but this can definitely be worth it. And you also have to realize that within these bigger swing trades, once we get filled, right, Once we find new confirmations over here, we can tighten our stop loss from this low to this low, for example, and add an extra long position over here, and that way compound our profits along the way up all the way towards $100 for one INJ. Guys, PrimeXBT now also offers a lot of crypto futures trading pairs, so definitely go and make sure to check them out. The link can be found in the description. If you sign up through a link, you also get a 7% beautiful deposit bonus.